Alright, guys, girls, everybody, new project. We've already seen the unboxing of this old vintage kit, one of my favorites from my childhood, the F-19 Stealth Fighter by Monogram. So I'm going to put a link in the video description if you want to check out the unboxing of this awesome old kit. You know, just see what's in the box. I mean, it's obviously, I got this thing secondhand off of eBay. Just a great what if, when we, back in the day when they weren't sure what stealth really was or what it was going to look like. Testers came out with their own version. I can't remember I think that Fujimi came out with their own kit, and Monogram did. And this was kind of the most outlandish of the what stealth might look like kits. So we're gonna start the work on this, and I'm pretty excited because I've been thinking about how we're gonna do it. Are we gonna do it straight out of the box? Are we gonna do a what if? Yes, we're gonna do a what if. We're gonna do a what if this is a current actual U.S. Air Force. What if this was real? But we're not just gonna do it like out of the box. A little bit ago, everybody got all worked up because they saw those pictures of the F-35 in what they call beast mode, which is basically they hang a bunch of external ordnance off of it because, you don't always need LO, you don't always need stealth. The F-35 really can't carry a whole lot of stuff internally. So from the beginning, they planned for the ability to put external racks on it so it could carry more ordnance when it didn't really need to be stealthy. It just, it needed to carry stuff. So we're going to do some modifications to this to have it not only look like a current day inventory aircraft, but we're going to hook this thing up for beast mode, just like the F-35. We're going to take some parts from the spares box. We're going to put some external ordnance on it because, really virtually nothing fits in the internal bay that comes in this kit. Within reason, we're not going to have it like just loaded for bear. We're gonna give it maybe a pair of AIM-9Xs, maybe, and then under each wing 2 more weapons, probably in the 500-pound class, and then something hanging from the internal bays. I also would like to add some kind of sensor to the bottom, and I'm thinking maybe we get the actual sensor ball from a targeting pod and build it in there. And what I'd also like to do is I would like to take all these raised panel lines and rescribe them with, I have the Tamiya plastic scribing tool that I'll be using for that. I want to make this one, I really want to make this one look nice. For painting, for our modern day stealth, we're going to be using the Hasegawa Have Glass Gray paint. I did a little research, some online groups, and this is supposedly one of the best Have Glass finishes to use. So this will give us a modern, stealthy finish for this thing, and I've just been dying to use that paint too. So this is actually a very simple build. Now, there's not a lot in it, and again, you can reference the unboxing. The cockpit is pretty sparse. There's some detail in it. Not a lot, though. It goes together fairly quickly and easily. So we're going to be spending most of the time on this thing actually rescribing the panel lines and then kind of formulating how we're going to do our beast mode, our modifications. Then decals, so markings for this thing. I think we're actually going to, and based on what the surface area for tail markings and everything is pretty small. We're going to use a combination of 148 and 172 decals on this thing. And so to do that, I'm going to source both 172 and 148 F-35 decals to put on this to get it all looking right. So to start off, I'm going to start with the panel line rescribing, which is going to take a little bit. I won't make you watch all of it, but we'll do a little bit of it on camera so you can see the process. And then we will do our typical 8-bit music, fast motion, get that all done. So it didn't take me very long to scribe all these panel lines. And one of the fortunate things about this kit when you're doing something like that is that the raised panel lines the kit has is that they're pretty fine panel lines as raised panel lines go. There are some older kits where the panel lines are very thick, very heavy, very pronounced. I went a little heavy-handed with my scribing to match the few engraved lines that the kit already had. I wanted them to match. So they are a little bit deep, a little bit thick compared to some of the more, I don't know, modern kits. And, you know, when you think about it, on a stealth aircraft, they actually minimize panel lines because each one of these panel lines, you know, if they were really there, would be a radar reflection source. They seal them on LO aircraft, for example, with a specific kind of tape to cover those panel lines. It's hell for maintenance crews because they have to break through the LO covering and then peel the tape and then, you know, take panels off. And then when they're done with maintenance, the LO shop has to then recover it with a very specific kind of tape and then spray the LO material and repaint the whole thing. It's not easy, but it keeps it stealthy. For our modeling purposes, though, you know, there it is. we've got panel lines on it. What would be more realistic would be no panel lines and then just a slight different color along the joints between panels where that specific tape is and how it holds on to paint and ram and colors versus the other materials, be it metal or composites or whatever around the aircraft. But okay, it's neither here nor there, just saying. So really the 6 pieces that require the engraving are the vertical stabilizers, the wingtips, the upper and lower fuselage. Now that that's done, we can get going with the rest of the model. So what I'm going to do, because it's such a minimal build process on this, and yes, I did, you know, I don't engrave panel lines often, so I did slip here and there, and I used my little Hasegawa template tool to help out. But you can see I did, you know, here and there on this, go a little far or slip and scratch. So there are some areas that I had to fill in with putty. Very, very easy to take care of, though. And just a little sanding and it's all good to go. But I also, because this model is weighted terribly, there's a little hole back there that's for a stick to hold up the tail end, because it is, this is where the tail section, this is where the rear wheels will go. And when this model is assembled, even just this piece alone, you see, it's going to sit on the tail. We're going to put nose weight in here to have it sit on the front landing gear. But the more you build this up, because a lot of the assembly is towards the rear here, with the engines, with the intakes, we put on the wingtips and the vertical stabilizers and all that stuff, and then we start putting, you know, because we're going to do this like a what if with stuff under the wings. The more weight you add to this, the more it just wants to drop on the tail. So originally, this kit is intended to have a little stand, a little clear piece stand to hold it up, which of course is, you know, not realistic. So I filled that little hole there, and we're just going to add some simple little lead weight that you'd put in a Pinewood Derby car or something. You could use fishing weights, you could use whatever, to the nose to help it sit flat on the front landing gear, so we don't have anything like a little clear post sticking out of the bottom when it's sitting. And that's what I've done with other ones of these kits when I built them. So we'll add that in as we go. I'm going to do the upper fuselage assembly before I do the cockpit, though, just because I have the pieces set out, and it's quick. I mean, it is quick and easy to get that all done and over with. So this is basically it. This is the majority of the assembly of this airplane that you can do on the fuselage and all. I'm going to let that putty dry, and then I'll sand that nice and smooth, and then rescribe these 2 panel lines right there, and we're in business. The cockpit assembly is basically this tub with the pilot. The pilot is holding the control stick in his hand, and so you can't really complete this unless you want to just make yourself a little stick to put over there. So the pilot's going to go in this one. I showed the detail before. It's not much, so we'll work on that. I'm going to make the whole interior of this black, similar to the F-22 cockpit, with assorted other details picked out. There's just not a lot to go with. It's got a very small instrument panel. Let me show that again. It is just tiny. It is this little guy right here. So there's not a lot to work with in this kit, unfortunately. It's going to fit right under the coaming over there. So if you can see here, I mean, it doesn't yield a lot of anything. There's not a good photo etch, option there. I don't have anything that small, so I'll give it what I can. It's barely visible, and it's barely workable to do anything with. But this should be a quick painting work with a little bit of dry brushing to bring out some details there, and we'll get going on it. We have one little cockpit tub finished. Didn't take that long. Just hard to reach some areas on the instrument panel, unfortunately. A lot of areas that may not be very visible once they're fully installed. And I didn't do a lot of detailing on the seat, because you're really not going to see a lot on the seat once the pilot's installed and sitting there. Speaking of a pilot, let's take a look at our little guy. I hate that I don't have great lighting for videoing here, because the truth is you're not seeing how detailed this little guy is. Let me put him down and see if I zoom in. There's I think anyway, some good detailing going on the pilot. Now, the truth is, in movies and everything, we see pilots with these colorful individualized helmets and everything, and the reality is in the Air Force, it's not like that. Just about everybody's helmet is just a standard gray color. But, I just wanted to individualize the pilot and make him look a little bit unique. But he's ready, he's set, and I think he's looking pretty good. So he's going to get a little drop of glue on his butt, and he's going to be affixed into the cockpit tub. And that's going to look pretty good. I did a little bit of dry brushing inside the tub just to give it a little bit of wear. I'll make it look a little bit used. And then once it's all glued in, we are going to have this. And he's got a nice reclined seat, good for G-forces and such. And like I said, you're not going to see much of the interior when this is all done. If the canopy is closed, we'll take care of those buffing marks on there. When the canopy is closed, you're going to see even less. So in order to show off anything at all, we're going to have to complete it with the canopy open. But it's a nice job on the cockpit, I think. As detailed as we're going to get it right now. And because of his knees, you're barely going to see anything of the actual instrument panel or controls. But, we know it's done. That's what matters. So I'm going to get him glued in, and I'm going to get this cockpit tub mounted to the upper fuselage. Then I'm going to go find my weights that I have somewhere, and I've seen about 100 times, and I just forgot to grab. I'm not sure where they are. Then we can add some weight to the nose, and we can get the 2 fuselage halves together. One of the steps that I want to do before we start filling out nose weight is I want to put some kind of targeting sensor, target designator into this. There's nothing there. So, I'm not arguing realism in this project, obviously, because it's this project. But I think it would be a cool touch You know, if we're going to throw any kind of laser-guided weapons on here, it needs a laser designator. Even if we're going to put GPS-guided weapons, it always, you know, it helps to have the laser on there to, you know, if you know how it works. Crews are always grateful to be able to firm up their GPS coordinates and make them more accurate before they release. So, you know, it just putting it on there just adds another step. So I have here, I'm not even sure where this came from, but this is not a sniper pod, a Lightning II pod in 1/48 scale. And what I'm thinking of doing is just sort of cutting just the actual optics part off and mounting it probably through the bottom of the fuselage, so it's just a little ball end sticking out. And, you know, is that stealthy? No, it's not, but it's a fantasy project anyway. Now, we've got to be a little careful of where we're going to put it because we've got this cockpit tub that's going to be taking up space. Originally, I thought it would go right about there, but that's going to be right where the cockpit tub is taking up the most space. So I'm thinking this might be kind of an opportune place to put it. And what's convenient is this ejector pin mark there is pretty much dead center. So if we start drilling out that ejector pin mark, that'll be kind of center in this panel that we want to use, and then we can just enlarge it for fitting our diameter here of the pod. So I guess that's kind of what I'm going to start at when I'm looking at making the space to fit this in. So I'm going to use an old tried and true method to get this out, which is to take a drill, and I'll drill one hole kind of in the center to begin with. And I want to be careful because I don't want to mess up the curve that we've got going in the fuselage itself. But I'm going to drill all along the edges here and then kind of punch this out, and then we can sand to make it a nice smooth hole, and then maybe take a rotary tool to enlarge from there. This is going to be a little time consuming, but it is a reliable way to kind of punch a hole in something like this. Right, so with the hole almost just big enough, now is the time where I want to start figuring out where I'm going to cut, because I don't want to make the hole too big. So I'd rather have the hole just big enough now, make the cuts on the pod as for where we're going to slice it, and figure that out, and then finish adjusting the hole just at the end. So I need to get a little saw out, and I can kind of pick my lines where I'm going to cut, which is probably right around there. And I can even score it out along this panel line to help me decide. And once it's cut, then I'll do kind of the finishing work on the pod in terms of sanding and everything. But I want to get a saw to make a nice even cut, and then we'll finish with the hole. A little bit of filling and sanding just to even out the housing here, and we are all set. This should be just about the right size. I'm just gonna buff out the edges, make sure it's nice and smooth. All right. And we will get our little optics ball mounted in there. So we want to make sure that, since it's not actually going to be able to move, we just want it to be mounted facing forward. We're just going to push that right through. That looks about right. And we'll figure out how far down And that's about it. You know, we'll make up in the story that this thing is retractable, you know, in the mythology of our fantasy plane that doesn't exist. But we're going to model it down. And I think that's about good. Maybe a little less. Right about there. I just want to make sure it's facing forward as best we can. Yeah, okay. Little twist. Alright. I'm just going to secure that in with some Tamiya super thin, just to get it set there. Using that gear door back there to make sure it's, you know, set evenly. And this actually would be better off if I put both the fuselage halves together, and then I can sort of eyeball it there. And now that we got our targeting sensor fully located, we know where that's going to go, we can start worrying about how our nose weight is going to fit in. Because of the odd shape of the nose and the shallowness of it, I decided that pinewood derby weights, maybe, you know, big rectangles were not the right way to go. So what we're going to use are some fishing weights, some nail weights, because they're small. We can clip them to size, we can put them wherever we want, and we can back them up with some steel egg sinkers if we need to for some of the wider areas. But these are going to allow us to position the weight wherever we want it, basically, within this weird shape of the nose we have. We can put them in the top and the bottom, and we can just, you know, crazy glue them in. And, you know, these things kind of can bend, and you can clip them, you know, so you can put them wherever you need the weights, basically, and we can position them to fit within the confines. So cool stuff to use on a project like this where you have just maybe an odd shape or odd spaces to fill within a nose that doesn't exactly conform to a standard aircraft nose shape. You just glue it down and try not to glue your finger to it and build around it. And that is giving us pretty much the weight we need, but if you want to be extra sure, these things are skinny enough that we can lay some right about there. And again, remember, it's just to balance the weight forward of these rear landing gears. So that is the goal. Just move the center of gravity forward a little bit. That's all we got to do. And those 5 should be perfect. I mean, should be more than enough. We'll just... And, yep, we've moved our center of gravity well forward of that pivot point there. So we are good with the weights. And everything still closes nicely. Good to go. We'll let the CA glue dry real quick, and then we'll put this fuselage together. Oh, look, I got my second lights up and running, so I've got a much better view of what's going on inside this cockpit now. And if I adjust the lights a little bit, you can see. Look at that. Better lighting. So we've got the cockpit done. You really still cannot see much of around the pilot inside, but you know, it is what it is. So where we're at now, so I have the fuselage joined, and there's some rough edges on this plastic that I've just been sanding down. I've got the lip here between the intake and the fuselage pieces sanded, and that's just about done. I've got the nose weight installed. We're nose heavy, or at least even, so we'll be sitting with the right amount of weight. once everything's fully assembled and ready to go. Now, if we need to, if anything is off balance once we're done, because we are going to put just a slight amount of weight when we do beast mode under the wings, we can always add a little bit of weight under the ordnance inside this bombay. So, because we're going to have the bombay, it rotates. So it's not going to be open. It's going to be displayed with the rotation so that the weapons are out, so we can hide a little bit more weight in there if we need to. But the next step now is to finish sanding off and smoothing all the edges. So I think for another step here, just to add another effect and, you know, add some more nice detail, just something else to look at visually. So we've got these panel lines. Now I didn't score these ones. They were there. And remember I said I wanted all these panel lines. I did them a little deep to match the ones that were already on the plane. I've been thinking about cutting them and cutting these canards off. I imagine these, you know, would be for like a movable surface, and that's why they had these deep panel lines in there anyway. And then we could position them as if they, you know, they would be moving as a movable surface, just the way we would position maybe elevators on another jet. I might do that. We'll see after I'm done with some more steps. I'm not sure. I'm not going to fix the canopy or anything until we're done with all of the other work that we're doing on it, though, because I need to do a little bit of work to take that scuff mark out of the canopy. But what we need to do now is we need to decide where the external ordnance is going to go. And one of the big considerations we have, by the way, if you look, I notice I didn't paint any of the internal engine-wise or anything. You cannot see any of that when this thing's fully assembled, which is why I didn't paint it. The compressor blades or anything like that. These, you can see the remnants of some pins, some marks, but they're totally flat, so they'll disappear once we paint. What we need to do now, and I taped these wingtips just to figure out how I'm going to position them, by the way. So now we need to figure out exactly how we're going to position the external ordnance for beast mode. And one of the really tricky things about this is that there is almost no ground clearance once we get the landing gears on. It sits very, very low to the ground. So even though I normally wouldn't do this, I'm going to have to position the landing gear early. Normally I'd get it all painted up and put it on a little later. So I'm going to attach them with just some PVA glue. So it sticks now, but we can remove it when we do painting and everything. And that way we can actually get a sense of how much room we have to work with when we're planning the hard points and the ordnance that's going to sit under them. And it's going to be challenging to find stuff that fits. You know, so I'm going to figure out where those are going to go, because we also have some curved surfaces here to deal with, and you know, we want to find stuff that fits. That's also going to be a challenge. So I'm going to work on that. And then we'll see kind of where stuff lies and what spare parts I have from what model aircraft to actually use for that. What I've done here is GBU-12. I've just tacked on to a mid-wing pylon from an F-16. And I have a Mark 82 that I've done the same thing with to represent a GBU-38 that I haven't built yet. And these basically will be our external ordnance. I'm also going to have an AIM-9X on the outer wing, but we'll get to that in a minute. But like I said, what's important with the very low ground clearance we've got here to make sure that these things will actually clear the ground. So, kind of blocking the camera here, aren't I? I just wanted to roughly assemble these to make sure that if we're going to use these, they will attach to the bottom of the wing and clear the wheels. And it will, just barely. So that'll work. And this also will go on the wing, and a little bit better than the GBU-12. I mean, this has about the same size as the GBU-38. So the question is now, where exactly do we put them on the wing to position it? Now, when we're mounting these, a couple things to take into consideration. The rest of the landing gear arc of travel here it's molded into the plane. So these are the rear gear bay doors. You know, a lot of planes, they kind of close up on the ground to keep foreign debris and everything out, so we've got to keep that in mind for realism's sake. You know, we want to play as real as possible, even though it's a fantasy plane. So we can't have anything that's going to obstruct, you know, over here at all. We also have to take into account this curve of the wing. We want to try to avoid mounting this on the curve because we don't want it to be canted inward, you know, any more than necessary. It's just going to look weird, and, you know, it's not very realistic. Why would you want it like that? So I'm also going to play realistic here and try to keep the larger, heavier bomb towards the center of gravity as much as possible. You don't want it on the wingtips, because then if you drop one and not the other, then you have a big heavy weight farther out from the center line, and that affects the center of gravity and the maneuverability of the plane. And so I'm thinking maybe we put the big boys kind of over here-ish. Again, keeping clear flaps, brakes, ailerons, anything like that, elevons, whatever these control surfaces are. So maybe over here, and then we can take the 38s and place them. Also keeping in mind that, you know, you want these hard points wide enough, far enough apart from each other that you're not worried about reducing the variety of weapons that can be loaded or anything like that. So maybe over there. Now the only problem is with this one, it's a little bit on the curve inward, so we might have to put a little bracing there, just to keep it hanging vertically a little bit. But I think this is good. This will be nice positioning. Sidewinder rail on this, and this we're definitely going to have to work because there is a significant curve there. But also on the F-35, the Sidewinder rails have a little, it cants. It's got a little angled piece, and then it cants outwards a little bit. And we might try to replicate something a little bit like that, because in flight, these wingtips are actually, I mean, they're all the way down like this with a severe angle. So maybe we have these things set up so that they're not hanging, sorry for the fumbly fingers, so that they're not hanging canted inwards like that, but that they hang vertically down like that when the plane is in flight. I'm going to have them set up in, because you can see, like, if here's, look at the landing gear here, if I can get the good angle, these would hang down significantly past where the wheels would come in flight mode. That's why in the instructions they give you the choices of folded up, what has come to be known as taxi mode, where they're partially folded, and then in flight. So I'm going to model them in taxi mode, where they are kind of horizontal to the ground, and I think that'll not only look cool, I like the look of it, but it'll also let us kind of show the wingspan of this thing and the shape of it, but without having our wingtips dragging along the ground as the thing is sitting on its wheels. So that'll work out well. So now that we know exactly what we're going to do with our air-to-ground ordnance, I have to work on a solution to hang the Sidewinder rails in the way that we need it. For that, I have to wait till we get these things kind of affixed to the plane, though, so we know exactly what the angle is going to be, so I can work on having them hang down vertical. In order to do that, to make sure that we get these things both perfectly at the same exact angle relative to the wings, I'm just going to take a piece of stock plastic, or even something like this ruler. I'm going to tape it to the wing, and I'm going to make sure that, like, using a panel line for reference, and then hold the wingtip to it and let it glue on, and I'll do that on both sides, and that'll give us a nice, perfect, even angle on both sides of the little winglet there on the side. It might even be better to do on the bottom like this, yeah. And that way we'll get a perfect angle on both sides, even, and we'll be ready to go. That'll do nicely. Oop, I guess that will not do nicely. Let's just get one little bond there to start gluing. And this method will let us get the perfect even angle on both sides. Just let that set for a minute, and then we'll switch the ruler to the other side, and we'll have both wingtips positioned evenly for our taxi mode, and then we can start to position our outboard pylons for the AIM-9s, and then we're almost ready to start priming and painting. In the meantime, I didn't have a clear green. I thought I did, a transparent green, so I just watered down a nice green color for the HUD. If I can get a good, it's kind of hard to focus on that, but I painted the HUD in that kind of thinned down green to give it a green color. I also sawed off the canards, did a little bit of drilling, used some brass wire. This is actually, I think, steel wire, so that I could position them in there. They are a little bit sloppy, honestly, but when the model's finished, I'm going to position them kind of like so, which I think looks kind of cool. I don't know if I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna have them looking forward, like that. So we'll just leave them in there for painting, so everything is painted pretty even. But that's going to give us just a little bit more detail, a little bit more custom look, you know, little action pose there of it sitting on the ground. I also, and while that wing is setting, I gave both parts of the canopy a dip in the gauzy shine enhancer. So the canopy parts now are super glossy and a little bit more transparent. They look great for when we're ready to mask them. So now I'm just going to get that second wing mounted, and then we're just about ready for painting. This is pretty much what our ready to paint, prime and paint aircraft looks like right now. So this canopy isn't fixed on yet, but it will be, just with PVA glue. I finished the attachment of the missile launch rails, and I decided to go, I made a weird choice. I went with the S210 launch rails. In fact, these would not be capable just through mechanics and electronics to launch an AIM-9X. They're old. The 16 S210s, these were basically the same wingtip launch rails that were developed for the wingtips of the original F-16 models, and then they were added to a small. This is kind of what they look like, but you know, this is a simplified version from an earlier Hasegawa kit. So these would be the stations 2 and 8 on an F-16. So I just basically cut right there along the pylon area. Took a little tiny bit of plastic, you can see right there, and angled and used that to not only, you know, help brace it, but angle it outwards like we wanted. So it gives that effect. So I like the look of the 210s. I don't know, I really like the look of them. I know it's not, you know, historically accurate or armamentally accurate to put AIM-9Xs on there, but what is accurate about this plane in any way, shape, or form anyway? So I've got to finish wrapping this little plastic wire around those two hard points there. But basically, and I installed the rotary bombay door. I have it fixed because we're going to mount it out. The real challenge is going to be coming up with an ordnance that realistically fits there. I thought about mounting, you know, a sniper pod or something similar in here, similar to how the F-111 had the pave tack pod in the weapons bay. But, and, you know, instead of mounting this guy here, but, you know, then if you put a pod in there, where's it gonna carry ammunition? It would be permanently in beast mode all the time because it wouldn't carry any ordnance internally. They did not think this model through really well when they thought about the internal weapons carry. We're gonna put something on there. I have a really cool new weapon set from, I think it's from Meng, arriving today. I'm pretty sure. And I think we're gonna see if we can get the rack and 4 GBU-39s, small diameter bombs, to hang right there, which would be awesome. If not, we'll see what else we can do. I'm ready at this point, like I said, to prime, paint, and get ready for the next steps, which will be painting, decaling, detailing this out, weapons, and then finally landing gear. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. I hope that you will join me for the next steps in the process in the next video. I'm really excited to see this all finished. I got the decals in for it. And you'll see them in the next video. We're going to go all 148 scale decals. I thought we were going to have to use 172 scale because of the small space on the verts there for placing fin flashes and all sorts of stuff like that, tail codes. But we're gonna make it work. So this is I'm having a lot of fun with this project, and I'm really excited to see how it all finishes up. So yeah, please join me again. Should take about a week to get it all finished and everything by the time I'm ready anyway. And our mythical F-19 and I will see you guys again real soon.